What's up, everybody? Week number 4 of the NLL Weekly Podcast right here on YouTube. Chris Schmidbauer, Dan Naraki, thanks so much for joining us here. As always, we appreciate the time. The only place that you can listen and learn all about Northwest Ohio's premier high school athletic sports conference. Again, NLL Weekly on YouTube. We've got you on iHeart. We've got it on Spotify. We've got it on Apple. We've got it on Pandora. We've got it on Stitcher. There's a lot of different places you can find it next day. So if you didn't catch the live taping, you can, of course, always watch us here on YouTube, 7 o'clock, or watch it once it gets archived. The other piece of it, too, again, you can listen to the audio version of it next morning. So make sure you check that out. And like and subscribe to us on YouTube. Definitely appreciate all the love we've received there so far as well. As I said, Chris Bauer, Dan Naraki. Dan, we have our first guest already here. So I'm going to go ahead and jump right in to our first sponsor read as well, which we want to say thank you to Car Stereo One. They are Toledo's best custom car stereo. They specialize in providing high-quality audio sound systems, speakers, and accessories for your vehicle with a wide range of products and expert advice. They can help you upgrade your car's sound system. They also do motorcycles. They do boats. So custom interiors, vehicle wraps, wheels, pretty much anything that you can think of to customize your vehicle. You can check it out at Car Stereo One. We appreciate Parker Lopez and his team over there. Again, 3120 Central Avenue in Toledo, 43606. Phone number 419-474-5553. Or online at carstereo1.com. So thanks to Parker, thanks to his team, and we'll go ahead and bring in our first guest because he was all ready for us, and we appreciate his time. It is the head coach of the Bowling Green Bobcats, Coach Shawn Kiss. Shawn, thanks so much for joining us tonight. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Pretty glad to be here.
So I know that the start probably not what you envisioned, although I think when we saw what that stat line was, or the score line was at one point against Anthony Wayne last week, I think your guys actually held their own pretty well for the most part in that football game. And before we kind of get into culture change and all that stuff, the nice part of that has to be the fact that you had a team that a lot of people probably didn't expect you to hang around, and you guys battled and hung around last week, which is a nice building block, I think, going into that Cardinal Division, those Cardinal Division games.
Yeah, we played tough with them a whole first half, and really all but 6 minutes of that game, we came out in the second half and kind of laid a dud and had some mental breakdowns, and it kind of fell apart quick. But the resolve of the team is so different from week 1 to week 3, and we're really getting the kids to buy in and really understand how to win, because this is a team that, like, last year was their first winning season.
Sure.
The playoffs for the first time in a couple of years, and teaching them how to win, how to battle through tough times and stuff like that has been, a big focus of the culture change here. And, it's good to see. We really wish we had week 1 back after seeing how we played last week. And, but it's moving forward when we get into the Cardinal Division, it's imperative. And, we had a great week of practice this week too, which is good. So we're building on successes, and they're learning how to prepare. And, it's been really cool to see how far we've come in a couple of weeks.
I think you have a really cool backstory, and I was reading and kind of doing a lot of research on you once you kind of agreed to join us tonight. And the coolest thing I think about your story, and I've heard a lot of people say this that have moved from somewhere else and have moved into the BG community, but your wife got a job at Bowling Green State University. You guys were Northeast Ohio people at that time. You moved to Bowling Green. And talk about what happened with the community, because to quote you, you fell in love with the community. What is it that is so special about Bowling Green to you?
Well, it's a smaller community. Like, my wife and I both came from the same city. We grew up in a bigger suburb outside of Cleveland and at Brunswick, Ohio. And, we both graduated with classes over 600 kids. And, it's, most of the kids in your school, but not all of them. And, you graduate with kids, you're like, I've never heard of that person before. So you come here and you kind of get involved, and, like, you see how, like, I'll have kids in class that she ends up having, and, the community's great. It's a great place to live. I really like my teaching job and stuff. I love teaching at the high school here. So, like, we've become kind of lifers here. I've got no interest in going anywhere else. I'm, more than proud to be the head football coach here. And I've kind of been slowly mentally preparing that for a while, because guys move around, better
Sure.
jobs open up and stuff like that. So, you just kind of, prepare yourself and wait for your turn. And, ever since I got here and, I started as a volunteer coach on staff and, watching how I, moved up and, gained more responsibility and stuff. Cause before I got here 9 years ago, I didn't even coach the varsity game before. I was a middle school coach for a long
Okay.
time, but I've been coaching football since I was 18 years old. I ran track in college. Most of my buddies played football, so they all left in the beginning of August. So there's nothing to do. So I volunteered with the middle school program back where I grew up, and I did that for 5 years while I was in college. And then, my first teaching job, I coached middle school out in Kent. And then when we moved here, getting my teeth in, was dying to get up to the varsity level and then, get my chance and then earning more responsibility and earning more of that. You just kind of get that fire lit inside you. And, I love the kids. I kind of love being one of the smaller schools in the NLL because it always gives us a chip on our shoulder to work towards. And, the way they prepare and, the heart that those kids have is, it's really easy to fall in love with being at this building and being on that coach of this football team.
One guy who recognized your talent early on at Bowling Green was Dirk Connor, who was the head coach at the time, also the athletic director now, obviously at Perrysburg. And you guys developed quite a friendship and quite a bond. And what was it? What did it mean to kind of gain that trust from Dirk? Because I think we'd all agree he's a terrific football mind and a terrific person as well. But then to also kind of what did you learn from him, I guess, over the time when he was the head coach there?
Well, I mean, there's a lot. We learned a lot of scheme. I like a lot of the stuff that he likes to do. But just how to treat your coaches, how to treat your players, seeing potential in assistants and stuff like that. And the guys that are eager to do the extra work and, put the grind into get more of a responsibility for the team and stuff like that. But, he's been super close with me still. We still talk probably once or twice or once a week, once every other week still. We talk ball all the time. When we were going through the hiring process, he was always in my corner, just kind of giving me ideas on what to be ready for. And, we talk scheme and personnel and stuff like that. He's just always been a good guy to have in your corner, and he's a brilliant head coach. So, he's a huge mentor to me.
He obviously takes a job with Perrysburg, and from all reports, you were offered an opportunity to go with him. You chose not to. What made you want to stay? I imagine, again, partly the community, but you didn't know Josh Wade from Adam, and he comes in and obviously is just the head coach for a couple of years. But what made you want to stay at Bowling Green when one of your good friends was being a head coach up in Perrysburg?
Well, I'd been here for 5 years under Dirk. I knew the kids really well, and a lot of the guys were out when Dirk left. So, I thought one of the biggest things that I could do to help out around the program here was to stay on and, give the kids a familiar face and stuff like that. And it would have been really hard to walk away from the players that I had. I really, truly love some of the kids that we coach. And, you develop a bond, whether you're a head coach or an assistant coach or position coach or whatever. And, the kids that we have and, you love being around them and you love watching them grow and stuff like that. And there was too hard to walk away. So, I've always felt that the best place for me to be was be here.
It's interesting because I think a lot of people would look at the situation too from a prestige standpoint, and that's not to denigrate what Bowling Green has done, but as you've said, one of the smaller schools in the area, not necessarily known for the championship caliber, although you're trying to get it there, program. When you have that opportunity, is it a situation too where you don't want to pass up the opportunity to keep that rebuild going in a sense, because you kind of helped lay that groundwork? Dirk obviously got a terrific opportunity. You don't fault him by any stretch for taking it, but there is something to be said about staying to see the job be finished. I think when you laid the foundation for the rebuilding blocks there.
Yeah, I mean, we had some really great years when he was here, and that's always our strive, is to get back to that when we're competing for NLL titles. And you've got the kids that are totally bought in what you're trying to do, and we're getting really close to that, which is a lot. I have a lot of seniors that really wanted me to be here. When the job opened up, I had a lot of kids, in my classroom, are you going to apply? Are you going to do this? And there was no question I was going to apply.
Sure.
But just fighting through and just trying to, bring the program back to what we know it can be. And, it was a great time too, because we've got a really, really, really talented freshman class that, we're getting excited. And even some of those kids are starting to get a little bit of looks on varsity and stuff. And, getting excited for that group. And, they've had some success in middle school and they're coming in with, they already know how to win. So it's, you've got some good foundation there to build on that group too. And, just being here is where I want to be, and being around these kids and watching them work and all that stuff. Like I said, like there's no better place.
Walk us through a hiring process like that. And you don't have to get too into detail necessarily, but I don't think any of us have gone through that kind of rigor. I mean, we've all probably gotten and done job interviews, but this one always feels a little different because a lot of people have a say in who the head football coach is at any high school, let alone a small town like Bowling Green, where people obviously want somebody who's invested in the community and the kids. What was that process like for you?
It was, it was a lot of work. But like I said, I just been kind of just like slowly preparing myself, putting stuff together. But, the first thing I did when the job opened up was I went to all of the lower coaches, like the junior Bobcats coordinator. He actually coaches on our varsity staff, Brian Howard. He's a great dude. So we talked for a couple hours just about vision and, what we want for the program and how we want things to go. Then I went to the middle school coaches and I talked to them, and, and you just try to figure out and get a plan and like put together like your program from the time they show up to flag all the way up till they're seniors and, they're playing in their 15th game or whatever it would be. So that was kind of the big focus, is just like, I kind of had the scheme down. I had a lot of guys on board that like wanted to follow me if I was going to take the job. So the coaching staff was 85% filled before, like ready to go when, if I would have gotten hired. And then, you just put together the foundation of the program. And, we've done a lot of investing in like, being around the youth program, and, we've got kids that coach flag for them, and, I'm popping in at practices and, hanging around for a couple of their film sessions just to be around and just see what they're doing and just, make them know who I am and know that I care. And then, same thing with the middle school programs and stuff like that. And, the big thing that we wanted to do is just turn this into the BG football program instead of high school junior Bobcats in middle school. So, that was the big focus. And then, it's always good when my reputation as a teacher and as being a coach here for a long time, and I coach track too. So, I've had lots of experience just being around the people that make those decisions and stuff like that. So, I felt comfortable. But, I prepared my tail off. Like I was looking at questions for interviews and, YouTube videos and everything like that for a long time. Cause like, I just didn't want to miss my shot.
You mentioned something that we had John Gallius on last week and talked about the importance of two things. One is recruiting kids that are already within your feeder programs. And that's something that a lot of public school coaches, when they take the job, don't understand how important it is. But then also re-recruiting them once they get to the junior high level as well, because you could certainly have, if a guy's really talented, there's plenty of private schools, obviously 20 minutes away, that they could go to. How have you gone about, I know you talked a little bit, but what are some of the things you do with the junior Bobcats and then also the middle school programs to kind of keep those kids invested, to have them want to be Bowling Green Bobcats when they get to high school age?
Well, we do our youth camp every year, and we get tons of kids there. We make sure we get out t-shirts. So, and then like this year, one of the big things we've taken on, cause around here, school spirit is up and down.
Okay.
And, you start to dig in and ask the kids, like, what's going on with, like most, like, we show up to lifting and there's like 4 kids in BG shirts. So like, we're like, all right, one of the big things is like, we need to give them stuff that they're proud to wear, proud to show off in the community, proud to have. So like, us and the junior Bobcats have done a couple fundraisers together and stuff like that to get those kids some gear. We actually have a warm-up shirt and sweatshirt that's going to every kid from flag all the way up to varsity.
Oh, wow.
They all wear the same stuff. We did the same thing for the coaches. Every coach got the same shirt and everything like that. Just making everybody feel like they're a part of the program, and like making the kids know that we might not be around all the time, but we care about your development. We want you around. We're excited for you guys to come up. And I've gotten to know a few of the kids down in the youth program too. So like, them by name, and when you see them, you say hi, and like, for me, it's just, it's a big deal, no big deal. Just saying hi to a kid. That's not a hard thing to do.
Sure.
It means the world to those kids. And, just letting them know that like, we're watching and we're paying attention, and like stuff that you guys do, like we care about. And I think that goes a long way to get those kids out. And then just like making sure that the program's like we want to win and we want to develop, but but like they got to have fun too. Because if they don't enjoy it in youth, they're never going to stick around for the grind of a varsity season. So making sure football's fun here in BG, and getting those kids the opportunities to just play and get on the field and stay hungry, and like when if stuff isn't successful, like getting them in the right mindset that like we got to be better and we're gonna work hard. And I showed up to they did some open field conditioning stuff for some youth and middle school kids, so I was there as much as I could for that. Just being present for those kids, because it's important to me, and it's important that they know that I care, that they're there, and that we want them to stay with the program. And the other thing is at BG being a 900 kid school, like we're always walking up and down the hallways as coaches looking for kids, like, hey, what do you do in the fall? Like,
you're big.
We think about playing football. So we've got a few kids on the back burner that we've already grabbed this year for next year, which is good. So but like you're always just recruiting the hallways too. So, and the big thing too is you want to keep the kids here in our district instead of open enrolling, going up to Otsego or going to some of the private schools and stuff like that, because it's a tough grind. And then like with this 7-on-7 stuff opening up, like you just got to keep your hooks in them so that they don't get interest from other places where they think there's better opportunities. Like you got to build your program to make sure that they know that we're going to take good care of them. We're going to get them, we're going to try to help them achieve their goals and stuff like that and keep them around.
Two guys you mentioned making Bowling Green football fun, two guys who have made it really fun this year, and a gentleman who I got a chance to see when I was doing stuff with BCSN a couple of years ago was Jay Shannon. And I remember he came up as a freshman to play. And I remember talking with Josh Wade at that point, and Coach Wade basically said, watch this kid. He's going to be really good by the time he's a senior. And I think you could probably say he was really good by the time he was a sophomore. But then Jackson Schaefer's another guy who has played really well. They're kind of your tandem at tailback. I know you've got a couple other kids who have contributed there, but what have Jay and Jackson added to this program and this team over the last few seasons?
Well, you want all your kids to contribute. You never want to have tendencies, but at the same point, when you got two kids like that are that good at football, like they need to get the ball. And, those two kids are workhorses. They're tough kids. They understand the game. They ask great questions, oh, if they do this, like, what do I do? And, and the bigger thing too is like, they're not just ball carriers. Like those kids block their tails off, they catch the ball, they run routes, and they both play defense. So like, they're not just the tandem at tailback. They're kind of the heart and soul of the team. And, they're the hype guys. They're yelling and screaming, getting people going, whether it's play or, vocally, like they're our rocks. And, when we go, they go. And that's kind of what I've said in a couple interviews. Like when we got going at Fostoria, it's because we got number 1 and number 7 going.
Yeah. They're kind of like that spark plug basically for the offense is essentially what you're saying.
Yep.
Yeah. And then the big boys up front. I know that you have a really nice offensive line, and so many times, and you hear anybody who's coached linemen before, they have to be the ones, I think, sometimes that give those guys the love, because unfortunately they just don't get the attention that they deserve. And I'm sure Jay and Jackson and some of the other ball carriers on your team would probably be the first to tell you that if those guys aren't doing what they're supposed to do, they're not racking up the yards and the touchdowns.
Absolutely. I mean, we're hard on that group because we know how good they are. We're coming off a year that we ran for 3,000 yards last year. So, and we got 4 out of 5 of those guys back this year. So, we get on them because we can be even better, and we know we can. But we don't go if they don't go. They love getting in the trenches. I just did an interview last night and AJ Miller was with us, and they asked him what his favorite part about playing football. AJ's our left tackle. He's just like contact. And you're just like, you've got a kid that's, on the O-line. He's just like, I just like to hit people. That's all I want to do. So those kids, they fill right into those gaps. And, we've put a little more on them to like do some more checks at the line and stuff, get us in the right looks. And, they've been really good at that stuff. They've been mentally sharp. They get what we're trying to do. They understand like when stuff's not right, on the field, those guys, they're so experienced, they can fix it on their own, which is great. So we could mess a play up and they're in the huddle talking about it with each other, and, the next play coming out and everything's all fixed and squared away. So, they've been great. And, some of those guys too, they're playing both ways for the first time in their career, and they're still getting off the ball, off the line, and, pushing people around. So, it's great to have those 4. And then the junior that stepped in, and Owen Rath, they're doing real well.
You guys like to do some different stuff on offense. You tend to run more out of flex bone, wishbone kind of style. I know that you've sprinkled some other things in. quarterback is so important in that because you got to know when to make the right reads, make the right pulls, all those different things.
Mhm.
Talk about who your quarterback is and kind of the progress that he's made this year.
So Jamison Horse has been our quarterback. Last year he was called on BCS. I think he was the handoff maestro. He took, like, he wasn't, his job was to get the ball to the other guys, and we ran him some, but like he really took a pride in that last year of just like learn how to give head fakes and looking the other way, even though he's handing the ball off one way, and just helping hit a guy looking the wrong way to start. So, but like we all knew that he wasn't going to be just that this year. We had to get him throwing the ball. We've gotten him some success in that, and he's mentally tough kid, and he's kind of the steady the ship. And we've also got a young freshman who's looking really good in Grant Gillespie, and he's gotten some time in the last couple of weeks, and we're real excited about him because he's our number 2, and he's kind of playing himself onto the field just to get some looks and stuff like that. So both those guys have developed tremendously. They ask all the great questions. They want to get stuff right. We do something wrong at practice. No, coach, we got to do that again. Like, let's get it right. Let's make sure last time we do that play is the right way, not the wrong way. And they've got a lot on their plate. They've got to be able to get up to the line, read coverage, look at the gaps, make sure we're not running into a guy, putting us in the right calls and stuff like that. So, those two, but especially J-Mo being the senior, they've been awesome.
You mentioned having another quarterback. I remember having called your game. You guys played Southview at Southview and pushed them to the limit. Mm-hmm. And you basically lost another start. You had a starter that was already out, then you lost the backup quarterback, and it ended up that you had to shuffle some things around and still almost got off of the field there with a win. But that just tells you how fickle things can be at that position, especially when you're counting on a kid to run the football a little bit more maybe than most guys would have their quarterback run. And injuries, unfortunately, when you're running more of a ground-based style of offense, unfortunately, just kind of part of what happens with the quarterback. So you got to always have more than one, I imagine.
Well, and like the other thing too is like, we're smaller schools. So, our numbers are big, but like you're going to put the best kids in the team on the field. So, Jameson plays defensive end for us too. So
right.
You've always got to have another kid ready to go, that's going to step in and just, level, be able to just run the offense and stuff like that too. And I don't know that that's ever going to go away because even when Grant takes over, he's an athlete. Like if we need him on defense, he's going to play some defense. And, Grant's been a middle school kid that's played quarterback and middle linebacker for that group for the last 2 years. And I know sometimes he gets a little finicky at practice because like, coach, I want to just go hit somebody. I want to play scout team quarterback. I get it. But, try to be smart with them, but at the same point, like, those are the kids that got to make plays for us. And, sadly injuries happen. So, you just kind of ride through that and, next man up. And that's kind of always been our mentality. You try to build depth as the year goes on. And, I really like where our depth is right now, especially, in the backfield. We've got some kids that haven't been around that are, blossoming in roles and stuff like that to, because, Jay and Schaefer, they, that's a lot of plays when you're playing 140 snaps.
Yeah.
So, those guys need breaks and, especially when they're both home run threats, they're never far away from a 60-yard run. And you never know when they're just like, I need one coach or I need two. So rolling kids in there and they're just, ready to go, mentally sharp. It's big all across the field.
Well, especially when you have nights like we've had this fall where week 2 is ungodly hot. Yeah. And like you said, you got guys that are playing 100 plays a game. There's no way that even the most hydrated athlete doesn't need at least a break. So depth was, I'm sure, tested that evening against Fostoria.
It was, but you know what? We had guys that stepped up. I thought we played a real good, complete game all the way through. And like it had been hot all week, so that helps too. So when you're used to the heat, it's the worst when it's like it's been like 82 all week, and then you roll into Friday and it's 92 to kick off, and then everybody's cramping both sides of the ball, and everything just gets sloppy. And but they prepared their bodies well. The one person that did get it the most was actually Jameson at quarterback. He had his first rushing touchdown and didn't come out of the end zone because he's like, coach, as soon as I took the snap, I was double calf cramp, ran into the end zone on my heels. So, he played a lot of snaps that night too. So it was good. It was a good way to get Grant some experience, let him loose. And, because, all intents and purposes right now, he looks like he's going to be the guy next year for us. So anytime we can get him some experience to go, it's always a win for us.
Guys made the playoffs last year. I know that was certainly a part of the goal for the season, but not the best of records in the Cardinal division. Close in some games, but
Yeah.
just didn't get it done there. You're happy about making the playoffs, and unfortunately, you guys got the fun job of playing maybe one of the best teams in not just the Division Three, but the entire state of Ohio and Central Catholic. But I look at the situation with you guys in that Cardinal division, and the beauty of the Cardinal division to me is that you can make a case for, I think, just about every team in the division as to why they could win the division. What do you feel that you guys need to do as a program to take that next step to start being in contention for that division title?
Well, a lot of it starts with preparation. I hate to say this, but like at BG, sometimes we feel like, if things go bad, then they're just going to be bad.
Sure.
And, with a program that has been successful last year, but has struggled the last 2 years, some of these kids, they don't know any other way. So, getting them to understand that like, not everything's going to go right on Friday, and that's
Right.
okay. But like, we got to go next play. Our mantra last week was, how to eat an elephant. And, all the kids like, oh, you do it one bite at a time. How do you beat Anthony Wayne one play at a time? That's been kind of our mindset lately is like, next play, whatever happened before, it doesn't matter. You got to go play the next play. And, that's the start. The second part is like, we've got to take weeks where we build and we get better. We can't be complacent. We can't be, okay, we had a good game last week, we're good this week. That doesn't exist. And, getting that through their heads and stuff like that. And then as coaches, like we got to have a good scheme. We can't be tendency based. We've got to have answers to things. And I think last year we kind of got caught coming down in the Cardinal, like running our wing T, but, teams packing 9 guys in the box. Like,
sure.
It's hard to run the ball that way no matter what.
Yeah.
So we've got to have a potent passing game where at least they're going to respect it and we can get guys off the line of scrimmage and stuff like that. So, we can open up the holes and stuff, but, like mentality of carrying out fakes and, stuff like that to open up pass game and, being accurate and understand what's going on the back end so that when we are throwing the ball that, our eyes are in the right place, we're reading the right people and stuff like that. And then like the other thing is like, I think we've improved 1,000% on defense.
Okay.
Those kids on defense last week played their tails off against Anthony Wayne. They had, if it wasn't for the offense, I mean, the offense really, we stumbled and we kind of lost that game for the team last week. And, Coach Roy Finley came over from Fostoria and he's done a wonderful job with those kids, and those kids are all bought in everything we're doing. We're putting them in good situations and, they're playing hard, and that makes a world of difference. Cause like, I want to say last year we had broke it down after the season about, what was our big issue on defense. And, a lot of it was we averaged 7 to 8 big plays a game that we gave up.
Sure.
The mantra this year was like, we're going to get lined up right. We're going to be gap sound and we're going to make teams earn it. Like if you're going to go score, you're going to score on 15. You're not going to score on 3. So, and those kids are all for it. And, we're playing hard. We're flying around the ball. We got 11 guys running the ball to make a tackle. And that's made us 1,000% better. That's what kept us in the game last week. And watching those kids play and take pride in the way that they play defense is really fun.
You mentioned the drives, but I think I'm correct in saying you're a math teacher, right?
I am.
So, I mean, just statistically, the idea that how many teams sustain 15, 16 play drives and score, I mean, it's just kind of a simple mathematics situation at that point of if you can bend but not break, then more often than not, we're probably going to see at worst a field goal, and at best we'll hold them on 4 downs and a turnover on downs. So, I mean, even if you think of it just from a simplistic standpoint, as you point out, I mean, it's hard for an NFL team to score on a 15 play drive, let alone a high school team trying to ask them to execute for 15 straight plays.
Yeah. I mean, I coach high school. Like I know like that not many teenagers are going to go 15 straight plays without making a mistake. So,
right.
If you just do your job and don't give up the big play and keep everything in front, make them snap the ball again, there's always a chance that something bad's going to happen for the offense. We know that, running the ball the way we do, we have to be accurate. We have to be smart. We have to be sharp. We have to be in the right spot, because when we get behind the chains, it changes everything that you do. And, that's the big thing for us on defense is just like, make your plays. You don't got to be a superhero, but, do your job, cover your gap, and make them snap the ball again, and good things can happen.
Got a game against Springfield this Friday, and this is one to me that's important, not necessarily because I would say that the competition is terrific. Springfield's had a tough start to the year, but they are a Buckeye Division school for one. And the other part of it too is they've got a home run hitter in Gabe Gregory who's averaging almost 7 yards a carry. He certainly has put that offense on his back on several occasions. When you look at that game against Springfield and what that means just for the psyche of the team, but then also kind of some of the stuff you're talking about of not giving up the big play, knowing that they have guys that you're probably not going to see outside of maybe Jay on your team, a guy that can be a home run hitter like that in a lot of the other games at the Division III level, especially once you kind of get to the playoffs. But I look at that game on Friday, and that's a big game where it's one that maybe a couple years ago you wouldn't have looked at it and said that's one we got to have. But I feel like kind of where you're at and what you're building towards, this is one you got to have on Friday.
Yeah. I mean, so we came out week 1, we struggled. Week 2, we played really well. I thought we played really well against Anthony Wayne, and, we have to keep the momentum going. Like, we've got to continue to do that. And, we've talked about that a lot, but their quarterback and their tailback, they're both really good athletes. And those kids, if they get out in space, they're athletic and, they're going to make plays. So we are well aware of those two. We know where they're always going to be. Number 5 on the outside, the receiver, he can go up and get a deep ball. Like, just understanding scheme and knowing their tendencies and stuff like that. We've invested a lot of time in more film this year with the kids and breaking down that stuff and, really emphasizing how we prepare mentally when we watch another team play football. Instead of being fans, you got to be a football player and stuff like that. So, it's a game that we have to have. If we want a chance at any kind of momentum in the Cardinal, if we want to get, Region 10 is loaded. They added Cleveland Benedictine. We still got the defending state champions in that region. And you've got some other good teams like Tiffin Columbian and some of those other schools that that the top 6 or 7 of those teams are going to be solid football teams. And we have to continue to become a solid football team. So we have to keep getting better every week. And that's, that has been our mantra all week. Do what we do, but do it even better than we did it last week.
How much is it important with your kids to get off to a good start? I know some teams, and you kind of talked about maybe the fragile egos a little bit with guys when things don't go the right way, maybe breaking down a little bit mentally. Is a good start, in your opinion, really important on Friday?
Oh, absolutely. It's, good start's always important. We came out and scored first last week. And we got stopped on defense and came down, and it's the same thing. But trying to get those kids to buy in, when we start rolling, not many teams can stop us, but we got to get our tires rolling, and we got to get that grip and get the feel of the game. And, at BG, sometimes we just have teams that just don't have energy. So finding the way that we come out of the locker room ready to go, first snap of the game, it's time to go. We did that last week, and we did that the week before. And, that's exactly what I expect this week is we're going to come out first play of the game. We're going to, hit them in the mouth and just keep coming all game long.
I'd be remiss if I didn't ask about the flag over your shoulder because I, like you, am cursed with the gift and, again, curse of being a Cleveland sports fan. I guess just on a selfish note, I'm assuming you're following the baseball season.
Oh,
yeah. Your thoughts on the Guardians at this point, other than that they're frustrating to watch at times.
That offense is so hot and cold. It's a team that's always pitched well. So yeah. But I've been a Cleveland fan since '95. When they were really good. I remember going to 6, 7, 8 games when they're selling out, and my dad calling the hotline to try to get tickets during the playoffs and stuff like that, and just oh, did you get him? Did you get him? Yeah. So I don't follow them as close as I used to. The 2016 World Series was a little heartbreaking. Sure. I remember being in the living room. We don't have any kids, but we have 3 dogs. We had a puppy at the time. And when Rajay Davis hit that home run, jumped up and screaming. Yeah. And the puppy woke up. My wife's like, well, looks like I know what you're doing the rest of the night. Yeah, that's okay. I'll take that one. And then, the rain delay hit and all the momentum went away. And you're just like, oh my gosh, you're so close. But it's, I kind of joke around with a lot of my friends and because some of them say I'm the ultimate pessimist sometimes. And I'm like, well, that's my Cleveland sports. Yeah.
Yeah, well, especially if you watched the Browns last Sunday too. I mean, good Lord. I mean, you might be able to loan some of your offensive ideas over there because it didn't look very good last Sunday.
Well, Dallas has got a great defense too. So,
they do.
It's tough. And realistically, there was only a handful of quarterbacks across the league that played well this week.
That's true.
A couple fantasy leagues, and I know there weren't many that played well. So,
well, you kind of hit on something though that I think is interesting. A lot of people have talked about this week, which is the lack of reps in the preseason for some of these guys and not playing in the preseason games, but you know this just as good as well as anybody. It carries from the high school level all the way up. Is if your guys aren't getting reps and building that chemistry during camp, then there's going to be zero when you step onto the field for the first time. And it seemed like that was kind of a little bit of an issue in the NFL this year, where there just wasn't a lot of preseason work that went in.
Well, like I remember, preseason was a build. Like you always got excited for the last preseason game because you at least get to see the starters for a half, and they don't even walk on the field, they don't even dress. And I think we're starting to see that in the beginning of the year. But at the same point, they keep adding games to the season, and you got to be smart with bodies. Like everybody's bigger, stronger, faster every year, and it takes a toll on all those guys that are playing football and stuff like that. So there's got to be a smart balance. I think they need to add one more week and add a bye week for every team. I think that would go a world difference, and that would probably get some more guys more focused into playing in the preseason and stuff like that. But I know they're doing a lot of those team camps where they're playing with other teams, and a lot of guys are saying they're treating that as their preseason games and stuff like that. But we all know that practice isn't a game, and it doesn't matter. The speed is always so different when the lights are on.
Well, we'll let you go. We do appreciate the time. First off, I think you and I have the best hairdos in Northwest Ohio, period. But I do appreciate the time. Best of luck to you. Seriously, I really appreciate you doing this. I know it was kind of short notice, and I know you and I have followed each other on social media, and it was great when you got the job. Congratulations on that. And like I said, the continued success, and I'm sure we'll be chatting down the road.
Absolutely. It's always a pleasure. I'd love to be back on again if you'd have me. So, don't be afraid to reach out.
All right. Thanks, Shawn. Have a good one.
Thanks. You too.
That was Shawn Kiss, the head football coach of the Bowling Green Bobcats. We appreciate his time with us here on NLL Weekly. Again, we talked about this with John Gallius last week with some of those smaller school guys, and you find out just how critical it is for those guys to basically keep teams engaged and to keep that psyche going. And it's funny because you obviously are a cursed Cleveland sports fan, much like myself, much like Shawn was. And the fact that he said that he's had to be the one that's kind of fixed that or tried to correct that at Bowling Green, knowing his background, I don't know how you do it.
That's an interesting one. And I also have to shout out, since he brought up the 95 playoffs, and I will never forget that Tony Pena home run in the 13th. That's one of my first baseball memories. But regardless, and not only that, it's also interesting but like you said, when you're trying to control the minds, reset the mindset at a school like that. But also the idea of constantly recruiting in the hallways, and I think that's it's almost a lost art if you think about it now. Is having to kind of have that mindset, especially as you're walking through between classes, repeatedly switching from the teacher hat to the coach hat, back to the teacher hat, and trying to again get kids engaged and keep them. I think that's the biggest thing. I think, having been at one point and as a freshman also looked at hey, you've got a little bit of size. You should kind of come out. Yeah. What are you doing? What are you doing after school? I'm running cross country. Why? But,
Yeah. No one ever asked me that. That's the one thing I didn't have to worry about. There was no coach that walked through the hallways and said he'd be a good player for us. So that's the unathletic genes that I have. But our next,
no one ever asked you why you were running cross country.
Oh, well, that too. But the cross country coach was happy I wasn't running at that point. Before we bring in our next guest, want to thank Victory Auto Mall. You can go to them. They're your trusted used car dealer in Toledo, Ohio. Whether you're shopping for your first car or your 10th truck, their staff provides outstanding service in a no-pressure environment. The only goal for them to find you a great vehicle that matches your lifestyle and service you well for years to come. Victory has an established exemplary reputation in their community, and they are a buy here, pay here dealership. You can check them out online at WeFinanceCarsToday.com. Call them 419-345-3603 or visit them 1632 West Lasky Road. And I'm happy to bring in my friend, my co-host, my guy on Fridays, former Whitmer coach, and as you can see, Whitmer Athletics Hall of Famer, Justin Keller on NLL Weekly. How you doing, Jeff?
I'm going to log out of here real quick. The way this thing's starting out. Really fast. Oh, boy.
No, I wanted to have you on because you have a unique perspective that I obviously don't have, because you've played, you've coached, and you've also been kind of a dad in the roles as well, where you're trying to kind of navigate a lot of things. But I guess just from like the coaching perspective, when you look at a season like what Whitmer's having that we've seen so far, what would make you excited if you were in that quarterback's room still, and kind of maybe what would you try and work on if you were working with that offense?
I think the progress Ford's made this year is tremendous. And you can see his growth. You can see how comfortable he is this year. And a lot of it, I just think, has to do with confidence. Having confidence, knowing this is his senior year. And going into last year, I think the one thing that he thought is he had to carry the weight of that offense on his shoulders.
Sure.
We had a returning senior running back who ends up hurting his knee.
Yeah.
You have basically two sophomore running backs. And I think he might have felt a lot of pressure of that. And then, eventually those guys kind of proved themselves, but we're already in the, middle of the season. And, but going into this year, I think you have some proven running backs. You got some proven receivers. And I think that was a heavy burden lifted from his shoulders going in this year, which is going to give him a lot of confidence, let him play looser and more relaxed and have fun. You can see it on the field so far.
The Blade actually put out kind of their first round of stats that they've collected through 3 weeks. And I was a little surprised to see that not only is Brady tied for, if you combine both divisions, he's second in touchdowns passed with 7, but he's also the leading yardage wise, passing wise, which if you think about how much Whitmer has thrown the football, it's not like it's exponentially higher than what we've seen in years past. So that does speak to the accuracy. It speaks to the level of play, and the completion percentage is a little bit higher than 50%. But if you take away that Central game, which I think we would both agree was certainly a little bit of an outlier, he's been really efficient as well. And the numbers back that up. And to say that, like I said, the passing hasn't been just where we've thrown it and seen like the greatest show on turf kind of thing. They're still running the football quite a bit as well.
Yeah, I think the efficiency of which we're running the football helps open those things up. I mean, he's got an 81-yard touchdown on a bubble screen to a running back, because we were able to loosen up that defense a little bit. And, the better your run game is, the easier it's going to be on them. And the easier it is for a play caller to be able to take some shots when teams start loading the box up. And we saw last week, going in, I didn't watch a lot of Clay leading up to last week. And I don't know if that was, just what they do. But it lended itself for Brady to have a big night through the air, which he did.
You mentioned Clay. How impressive was Mason Heinchel last Friday?
Man, he's special. He really is. He really is.
And not to give too much of like your personal life away, but you are related, I won't say how, to Ben Roethlisberger. Yeah. You were around him. And the one thing that you had said afterwards that I know that you didn't say on the air, but I thought really stood out was he was doing things that you felt like you remember watching Ben do when he was at Findlay as a senior. That's not to say that Mason Heinchel is going to be a first-round draft pick and an NFL Hall of Famer, but I think it speaks to just how good he is. And the attention maybe is not always there because he's at Clay, that people don't assume that you're going to have a guy that's that good. But so much of the attention was on Ryan Montgomery, and deservedly so. But I think if Mason Heinchel's not on the same level, he's just a tick behind, because he was really impressive last Friday.
Yeah, he just built different. Matter of fact, I got home from the game Friday night, and I told my wife, I was talking about the game, and I was talking about, Mason Heinchel, how good he was. And I even told her, I said, I so badly on the air wanted to make that comparison to Ben, but I didn't really want to open up that can of worms on the air. But he really does. And just his size too. I mean, we've seen a lot of great quarterbacks that have great escapability, that are able to extend plays with their legs. He just does it differently. You think he's just so big and strong, which I think is Ben comparisons there, and his ability to keep his eyes upfield and make those plays is it takes me back to watching him. And I think I told you after the game, the first time I ever saw Ben play was his sophomore year. I was still a student at Bowling Green. He was a sophomore in high school. And the first time he was playing quarterback in a JV game against Fremont, and not exaggerating, there was 5 illegal man downfield penalties because he was running around, kids were hanging off him, and I'm like, wow, like this. But it took me back to that. And I felt like I was watching a young Ben Roethlisberger there.
We mentioned Ryan Montgomery already. Tough news for him, obviously, being out. Before we kind of talk about what Finley has done, you obviously know the Montgomery family as well. Yes. Finley guys, your thoughts on how Ryan played again? I know we won't get to see him as a senior, but he really put on a show last year and was a big reason why that team was a co-division champ. And it almost makes you wonder on some weeks, because of how good he is, how they even lost some of those games, because he seemed to be just so good at vision of the field. He's athletic. He could run the football as well. The touch is there. Obviously, Georgia wouldn't have brought him in and recruited him if he wasn't very good. But your thoughts on Ryan's play?
Well, you kind of said it, like his ability to see the field, the touch he has on the ball. But, I mean, he throws any ball you want, whether he has to throw an out from 15-yard out from the hash to the sideline, whether it's a 2-ball between the safety and the corner, he can stick it in there. He knows when to take some off of it. But the thing that makes him really unique, other than his size and all those tangibles, is his ability to get rid of the ball quickly.
Yeah.
When guys are open, I mean, that ball is out right now, and his release is really special. And I'm sure that's one of the things that puts him in the upper echelon of great quarterbacks, not only in the area but in the entire country.
When you look at just kind of your own personal experiences of kind of that crush that you get being recruited, and Riley, your son, went through that. What is that like as just kind of for a guy like Ryan when you're going through and you're getting all that extra attention? Because we oftentimes forget that these are 15, 16, 17-year-old kids, and all of a sudden the world is kind of at their fingertips a little bit. Certainly the area's is at your fingertips. How as a parent, again, just kind of from your own experience, but also like what is some of the stuff that a kid like that's going through when they're getting heavily recruited like that?
Riley obviously wasn't recruited at the level, although he did have some great experiences. And the one thing I wanted him to do is keep everything in perspective. Riley was afforded the opportunity to go down to Alabama. They had a big man's camp, but even though it was a camp day, they still worked out quarterbacks. So he was invited. Dan Enos was the quarterback coach at Alabama at the time. He came into Whitmer, and he wanted to see him down there at camp. So we went down there, with the mindset, like, you're going to walk out of here with an Alabama scholarship. It was just like, let's just enjoy the experience of this. Your heart's going to lead you to the right place. And, every opportunity we had, I mean, we got to go to the Ohio State-Oklahoma game, the one that unfortunately Ohio State lost when Baker plants the flag, so just some really neat experience. Got to meet a lot of great people. And like I said, just keeping it in perspective. And Ryan, a lot like Riley, I think sometimes you got to worry about the ego,
sure,
or thinking, I've made it. I got a trip to, I'm going to Ohio State, Oklahoma game. Or Ryan's built the same way, and he has great parents, which are going to help keep him grounded as well. But that's always in the back of your mind, and you're always keeping an extra eye on those things, like just to making sure that he's staying humble, he's continuing to work hard, and like I said, most important, just enjoy the experience.
Yeah, because I think when you get into those moments, it probably helps too that an older brother went through the whole thing in Ryan's family, because obviously Luke went through kind of the same crush. But as a coach, I think that's probably where you, having seen guys get recruited before and being around for, granted it wasn't your position, but guys like Chris Wormley and Kenny Hayes, and you were on the basketball staff when Nigel was being recruited. So it's not like you haven't been around, but it's one of those today where the pressure and the amount of eyeballs that kind of get associated with it, because recruiting has kind of become this beast that we stalk like crazy if you're a college fan of basketball, football, whatever it is. And it really has taken, because of the internet, and taken it where kids all of a sudden become stars probably before they're ready for the stardom that comes with it.
So one of the things I am really proud of Riley about was how he did handle the whole thing. In that when he received an offer, he wouldn't tweet it out.
Yeah.
He wouldn't tweet it out. And Coach Winters, I mean, it's great publicity for your program to see that. Like, well, we got to figure something out. So, what would happen is every time you got an offer, let Coach Winters know. Whitmer football would tweet it out, and Riley was asked to retweet it. But he wouldn't make his own tweet regarding that. And to speak to your point about how the internet just kind of, Chuck Martin, head coach of Miami, came to Whitmer, and he said, we talked first. He had come in, and with my role as a dean there, a lot of times I would entertain him until Coach Winters got down, and I was sitting with Coach Martin, and he told me, he said, we were on his social media, and he doesn't put a lot out there, and he said it's probably hurting his recruiting a little bit. And I said, well, I said I'll say something to him, but I would be shocked if it changes. But I did appreciate the feedback from him, and of course it didn't change, but so much so, like you said, in the internet and social media, I mean, it's just,
I think that's a matter of perspective, though. I mean, I understand what he's saying, but how many times too have we probably seen, and I'm sure these horror stories as well. We've read them, we've been around, where kids put the wrong thing out there, and you lose everything. Yeah, I mean, that's one of those things. Yeah, you want to be a self-promoter, but there's a fine line, as you said, between what you should put out there and what we see adults who can't toe that line. I don't expect 15-year-old kids to be able to do it. So that's interesting that was kind of his feedback there. I did also want to kind of get your thoughts on some of the other teams in the area. Anthony Wayne, I know we haven't seen him yet. You got a chance to look at them last year. We had Grant Kinney, who's their quarterback. He's going to Colgate. They've got some really good tailbacks. That was a game where I feel like we're going to Anthony Wayne this year, and not to go too far ahead in previewing that game, but that's going to be a different field because it's going to be on grass. And I know people kind of roll their eyes when you say that, but you can't convince me after we played at Southview and watched our football team run around like they were on ice skates for the first 35 minutes of the ball game. But what have you seen from that Anthony Wayne team, and what you've been able to watch out of them so far?
Well, honestly, when you watch Anthony Wayne, the names change, but if you had a nameless, numberless team, you wouldn't be able to tell if it was a 2024 team or the 2018 team, because they just, they play hard. They up front, I think they're big and physical. The one thing I've always said about them up front is they are so disciplined and so fundamentally sound up front, and they just allow those linebackers to run around and make plays. And they have some good ones there. And but it looks the same. And then the other thing I think they do a really good job of is adapting their offense. And their offense doesn't change. And I think we've talked about this on the air. Their offense doesn't change. I mean, they're going to do the same thing, but how they utilize their quarterback will change year to year. They're not going to ask Grant Kinney to drop back, in 5-step drops and try to pick apart defenses. He's running the ball. He's a phenomenal ball carrier. He's a great athlete. It kind of reminds me of you got to help me out here. Schneider, was it
at Anthony Wayne?
Anthony Wayne a few years ago.
I believe you're correct. Yes.
Schneider, that kind of kid. Where just a phenomenal athlete. Now, I do think Grant Kinney is probably a little bit better passer, and their run game allows them to open some things up, and just some wheel routes from the backs, play action fakes, just taking advantage of a loaded box when they bring the extra safety down, and he's able to take advantage of that. But like I said, it looks like all the really, really good Anthony Wayne teams we've seen throughout the years. Just the names have changed, and it's a solid team, and they're really well coached.
You mentioned tailoring your offense. I love talking with you about this because when you were the offensive coordinator, there were a lot of guys that you had where certain guys did things better than others from year to year. And to use a good example, the type of offense you run with Nick Holly at quarterback is going to be a lot different than the type of offense you run with Chase Bodeman at quarterback and all these different guys that you've had, or Riley for that matter. How important is it from your standpoint and kind of just an overall coaching philosophy to be able to tailor what you do to what your kids do well?
Oh, I think it's important. I'll tell you what, one of my biggest pet peeves, and it just makes me cringe when I hear it, I don't care if it's in basketball coaches, is when they talk about their system.
Yeah.
Right? Like, oh, we have this system. It drives me nuts because, it's not college. We can't go out and pluck kids to fit the pieces that we need in our system. So we have to be able to adapt. Now, we're going to be a heavy counter team. We know we're going to do that. We're going to run power. We're going to love to run inside zone. How that looks, what those formation looks like, what personnel we have on the field. Are we going to ask the quarterback to read the backside end? Are we going to find a way to block the backside end and RPO off of it? Right. And those are the things. Do we have the receivers that are going to be able to do that? We had a good example from a receiver perspective, Justin Johnson.
Sure.
He was a converted running back to receiver going into the 2019 season. And he had a lot to learn, and it was all foreign to him. And it took him a while to get going. So we had to simplify things for him until he got comfortable. Wasn't very good in week 1 against Start. Fortunately, we didn't really need him there. But when we got into our we had Perrysburg and then Findlay, St. John's. He figured it out week 2. He was electric against Perrysburg and Findlay. Unfortunately, got hurt against St. John's and ended his season. But my point is we watered it down for him. We made it easy until he started getting comfortable. We just didn't plug him in and say, this is the offense. You need to learn it. This is what we're doing, right? We had to adapt things around what he was mentally able to do until he got comfortable. And as he got comfortable, we just kept adding more and more and more to his plate. And gosh, it would have been awesome to see what that kid could have done, if he could have played the first season that year.
You mentioned Perrysburg, the evolution that they've made from probably when you started coaching to where they're at now. It's just, again, if I had told you 15 years ago that, oh, by the way, Perrysburg's going to be one of the best teams year in and year out in the area, we probably would have laughed. But Whitmer was on the receiving end of some pretty good beatdowns from the Yellow Jackets in 13 and 14 and 15. I know we won, but they were really good that year too. Dirk Connor is obviously not Matt Kriegel, but I think he's kind of continued a lot of that success. With what you've been able to see out of Perrysburg, what do you like about them?
Well, speaking to your one point, we talked last week about how winning big games, it's not something you just go out there and do. It's something you get. And I'm telling you, Dimmerly, and Hafner, they set the table.
Yes, they did.
Not take anything away from Coach Kriegel and Dirk, but they set the table. Like, they made winning an expectation out there. They were such phenomenal quarterbacks, and they had a great supporting cast as well. But now year to year, now you're in the 6th grade watching Dimmerly, you're like, oh, this is exciting. This is, and then all of a sudden the kid that might not be playing football, he wants to get on that football field on Friday night. The crowd's packed, they're winning football games, and it just starts to become the norm. And I think that was a defining moment for them, having that run, which actually started in 13. 14. And it's funny too, because we actually beat them in 13. Just to speak to your point again, I think it's a great example because we came off the 2012 season, 14-1, lost in the state championship game. We roll in there. Was it week 1? It was week 1.
Yeah, it was to open the season.
Yeah, to open the season. And here's a young Dimmerly at quarterback, right, who hasn't had a big game yet. We're Whitmer, and they're used to winning. We're supposed to win, right? We won. We lost 3 games or 4 games in 3 years, and they're so dumb. They walked on the field like, "Hey, we're Whitmer. We're going to win." And they kind of thought that. Perrysburg, on the other hand, is like, "Oh, here comes Whitmer," and it was probably one of the least talented teams we had, only because we were so young. I mean, we had 11 sophomores that lettered that year, and but we ended up winning that game. I think that year, week 3, Perrysburg lost to Central, and then from there they won. Ended up going on to win like 30 regular season games in a row. But like I said, those guys set the table for, well, I believe, a lot of success that Perrysburg has today.
The show that Gus Dimmerling put on in 2014, and then the one that Trevor Hafner put on the following year, were two of the finest quarterback exhibitions I think I've seen at the high school level. And we've watched a lot. You've seen more than I have, but we've seen a lot of really good quarterbacks come through Whitmer Memorial Stadium or Whitmer play over the years. And it's hard to find two finer performances than what Dimmerling and Hafner did in those games.
Yeah. Both a little different in how they did it. Dimmerling was so smooth. It was like, I watched some highlights of Iverson playing quarterback, but not on the football field. But he reminded me of like a point guard, like a very skilled point guard. The way he would maneuver and contort his body and slither and just, there's plays where he's running full speed, stops on a dime, backpedals 2 steps, and then accelerates like he's, driving from the lane, trying to set up a defender. And then Hafner was, one of the toughest, greatest competitors that you could ever hope to have as a coach.
Yeah. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit because I'm curious your thoughts just in general. Give me your and it could be any doesn't have to be anybody you coach, but who are the top 3 quarterbacks you would say that you've seen at the high school level in your time as a coach?
Okay.
And you can't put yourself in there.
I wasn't going to. I did see Ben in high school, so he's up there.
Okay.
And ironically enough, I'm going to have to put up his successor at Pittsburgh, Mitch Trubisky, when we faced him.
Yeah.
He was phenomenal. And then, I'd have to go with Kaiser, Shawn Kiss.
Okay. Yeah. Where would you say, and again, I don't want to put you in the position of like picking or choosing quarterbacks, but who would you say that the guys that stand out to you over the years, not to discount anybody, but what's the one or the 2 guys that that you remember the most, or that guys that made a deep impact on you as your time coaching?
You mean players from Whitmer?
Yeah.
Gosh.
I mean, he went to war with a lot of different guys, so I know that's asking a lot.
I think there is so many, and I have a lot of stories, and some of them aren't necessarily quarterbacks. I have a great story about a player we'll save for another time, Devon Fears, who had an unbelievable experience speaking to him after we lost the state championship game. He was a kid no one's ever heard of in the football arena, but he played and just had such an impactful conversation with him that just put things in perspective for me as a coach. I think the first one is probably it was Donnie Dada was probably the first one because that was his sophomore year. Well, let me rewind. He was a sophomore the year before Joe got there.
Okay.
We struggled that year. We were 2-8. Joe gets announced as the head coach, and I remember in the science lecture hall, players come down. I was on my playing period at the time, so I came down to listen. And he was walking out, and he goes, "You're coaching again next year, right?" And honestly, at the time, we didn't know. Joe interviewed every guy on the staff, 2 or 3 interviews. So it wasn't like, "Oh, you're on the staff, you're in the building." I said, I think I just told him, just because he seemed concerned. But unfortunately, that spring, Donnie was a great baseball player too. And going into his sophomore year in baseball, he broke his leg.
Okay.
And he missed all the offseason. He didn't scrimmage. I remember we scrimmaged at South. He was unable to scrimmage and just barely got back week 1. And he wasn't in shape. And if you remember Donnie Dada at all.
A little before my time, but I know the name for sure. I think we froze.
A big, thick kid. He and Ashland. We good?
Yeah, you're good now.
All right. But anyway, so he kind of lumbered anyways. He kind of looked like, he did. He ran like you would imagine I would run when I get out of bed first thing in the morning. Like he just kind of lumbered. And I remember Joe, after week 1 or 2, which we started that season 0-2, we're in the coach's office, and he said, to the staff, he's like, you can't tell me we don't have another guy that can play quarterback. This guy walks around like an old man, like, you got it. And I said, Joe, like, this guy, I mean, he's a tough kid. I just knew enough about him. And I mean, I went all in on him. And I don't know Joe real well.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I felt like he was taking a chance on me, at least as a coach, and trusting me and doing quarterbacks and some of the responsibility he gave me. And I went all in on him. And Joe still laughs about it to this day. You know, like, I can't believe I almost gave up on Donnie, and thanks me for, you know, but that relationship that we built, because, man, I was dead set on making him the starter and doing whatever I could, not just to save my job, but because I love the kid so much. You know, I wanted to see him succeed, and I wanted to see him play quarterback. And, you know, he was obviously a phenomenal player for us.
Before I let you go, I do want to talk about some of the head coaches that you and I have both worked with. And obviously, Joe Palka's up at Adrian now, won their first game last weekend. Jerry Bell, who, again, you and I both have a ton of love and respect for, is now the principal. And then Ken Winters, who's obviously the current head coach. I don't think, and you obviously worked with some other ones, and Pat Cacciardo Sr., and then also, you know, played for him, and then Jeff Robbins and Dan Fope. But I don't think the stretch of coaches that Whitmer has had as the head coach, I don't think you could find three guys that do such a good job. They all have their strengths. I think we both agree that they all had their weaknesses or have their weaknesses, but I don't think a lot of teams don't realize that to get the stretch of head coaches that Whitmer has had and to continue to carry that success, part of it's the staff, but it also comes down to the head coach. And Whitmer's had three really good head coaches in a row. It obviously starts with Joe and kind of setting that system, but to be able to take what Joe kind of put in place and what he built and carry that for over a decade, that just doesn't happen at places when you don't have good head coaches.
No, and I think a lot of places too. So Joe was hired. I mean, so we're almost going on 20 years since Joe was hired. And to have two hires since, both within, you don't see that a lot. You know, if a coach leaves, you know, looking, we need some new blood in here. We need a, you know, shot in the arm. And Coach Bell and Coach Winters, again, doing it their own way, but the blueprint is there, right? Like, you know, whether it was, and I think one of Joe's strengths that has been carried on throughout the other two head coaches is building a staff, coaching your coaches, making your coaches better, holding your coaches accountable. And then just the building of relationships with your players is, I know it sounds so simple, but that's where you have to start. That's where you have to start. And then the rest kind of, you know, trickles down from there. But, you know, I can't say enough about my opportunity to work for all three of them. And actually, my first varsity job was with Dan Fope.
Right.
You know, who, you know, I give a lot of credit to. I would say gave me my first opportunity, but he actually talked me into coaching. Like, I was not interested in coaching football. I was coaching basketball, and I wanted to be the next head basketball coach at Whitmer when Bruce left. So, you know, he talked me into it. And then after I started doing it for a couple of years, I just, you know, fell in love with coaching it. But I give Dan a lot of credit too.
We'll let you go on that, but I do want to say, I know that I like to give you a lot of grief, but you are one of my favorite people. You know that. I'm so happy that you decided to work with us this year. And you and I have had, I mean, we've been over a decade of friendship and talking and all that stuff and getting to know each other. And I don't think there is somebody who is as knowledgeable about the game as you are. And honestly, I say that having been around a lot of coaches, and it's part of the reason why I wanted you up in the booth with me, but also why I love having you on this too. And I know we're going to try and do it again later in the season, but again, I really do mean it. I appreciate you doing this, and again, happy to call you a friend, and also happy to work with you on Fridays.
Well, thanks, Chris. I appreciate it. And, you know, I was a little bit reluctant, you know, to do the radio. It was a little bit out of my comfort zone.
Yeah.
But honestly, you know, and credit to you, I'm like, I was thinking about it. I'm like, I'm just, you know, you used to come in the coach's office. Mm-hmm. I'm like, I'm just going to talk football with Chris. Like, we're just sitting in the office, and you make it really easy. And, you know, I'm having way more fun doing it than I thought I would.
Yeah.
And a lot of it's credit to you. Like I said, you kind of make it easy. And like I said, we just talk football.
Yeah. Again, what a lot of people don't realize is I used to literally, when Bryce, who is now at Adrian, was a freshman, I think in junior high, I think the practices were after yours. And I used to just basically sit with you for like an hour and a half, and we just kind of spitball and talk. Yeah. And that's what I'm glad we've been able to bring up to the broadcast booth this year. My friend, I will see you on Friday. Thanks for doing this. And we'll see you. I'll make sure I get the pregame script over to you in a timely fashion.
Yeah, please do. I got to preview it. Proofread it for you.
All right, thanks. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, we'll see you. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Yeah. That was Justin Keller, who is my co-host on Fridays, along with Dan Naraki, who does sidelines with us. And Dan, I know you and I have been doing this for a couple years, but you've been on radio for a long time. And I knew I made the right call when we walked out after we had met as a group, and you looked at me, and the thing I think that meant just as much to me was when you said, Justin Keller is going to be really good at this. And I think we both would agree that he's been pretty darn good at this so far.
Oh yeah. And I think we also said after week 1, I kind of looked back and went, you know what? He's got this. I mean, he's got this.
I don't have to talk very much anymore. He basically he takes all the knowledge and yeah.
And I said the same thing. I'm like, every time I was like, oh, I might have this something. I'm like, oh no, something just pointed out. Never mind. Don't worry about it. You guys are good.
Let's go ahead and do our week 4 previews. I know we went a little longer than normal, so I'll let you go ahead and start with our week 4 previews here.
We'll do our NLL whip around, and we will start. Actually, we'll start with the games that we talked about a little bit ago. Bowling Green hitting the road to take on Springfield. Both of these teams coming in at 1-2. Springfield coming off a big loss to start a week ago, dropping this one 28-7. So it'll be an interesting game. Both teams looking to continue some momentum or needing momentum. But the question is, and I guess, the answer after we talk with Coach Kiss is that running game of the Bobcats going to be enough to hold sway on Friday?
I think that's the great question. And obviously Coach Kiss would like to tell you that, yes, it will. The question I have more so, I think, is about Springfield right now. And I say that because with the Blue Devils, they do have talent there. That's the one thing people don't get. The skill positions at Springfield are good. I mentioned the tailback. Coach Kiss mentioned their quarterback, who our good buddy Mason Lowry, who works with BCSN. He had their game last week. He said quarterback's just learning to play the position. He's an athlete. They've got receivers. It's a question of, can Springfield not shoot themselves in the foot? I think Bowling Green's a solid team. I don't think they're going to surprise anybody with who they are, but can Springfield figure out a way? That's a game a year ago that Springfield loses. They're obviously at Bowling Green, but to me, the look that I have is, who is Springfield? How consistent can they be? And how fast can they learn with some of those guys that are just athletes playing positions to actually be the position that they're placed in? The running game for Bowling Green is going to score points. They're going to move the ball, and they're going to control the clock as best they can. So Springfield's got to have an efficient offense. They got to be able to move the ball down the field. I know Coach Kiss told us he'd love them to have to drive 15, 16 plays. Springfield's going to have some quick hitters in this game if they want to be able to keep pace. And that's the number one question. LaCharles Smith, I think, is a good head coach out at Springfield. I think he does a good job with what he's got. But to me, I look at that game and I wonder, can Springfield keep scoring enough points in order to keep pace with the Bobcats, which that's what I'm not sure we're going to see yet.
The Napoleon Wildcats had no problem scoring points last week as they blasted Northview, but now they step up in competition and head to Anthony Wayne, who beat the aforementioned Bobcats a week ago relatively handily. We know Anthony Wayne is good, as you guys mentioned. They're just kind of always at a point where they're just gonna be good.
Yeah.
In this one, though, the question will be, how gritty is this Wildcat team?
This is one of those games that I think Tyler Swery is going to learn a lot about his group. And that's not to say he doesn't know, but this will be their toughest big school game that they've got on the docket. They have the Generals at their place, grass field. team that's bigger. Shatler Stadium is not an easy place to play. I look at that Napoleon team, and I'm not expecting them to win. But what I do expect them to do is keep it close and do similar to what Bowling Green did. Keep it close for a half, maybe 2.5 quarters, and then figure out, can Anthony Wayne pull away late? Probably. But that's the one where, if we're going to find out a lot about this Napoleon team and how they lose, and I know that that's a crazy thing to say, but how they lose is going to determine a lot of what people think of them moving forward. They're going to be in the conversation in the Cardinal division because they're a good football team, period. We've seen that. But that's a team last week that they lost to Northview in overtime last year. They beat them 59-0 last week. That's obviously a huge swing in scoring and point differential from a year ago. So for me, when I look at this Napoleon team, how good are they? I think you're going to find a lot out. If they keep that game close, or again, pull off some kind of upset, I don't think that'll happen. But if they did, we're going to know they're really good. I just want to see that group keep it close, because that's going to tell me a lot moving into the later portion of the season when we get to those Cardinal division games and even into the playoffs, how for real this Napoleon team is. I think they've been tested, but their toughest test to this point was against Liberty Center, and they lost 35-7. And I guarantee you that Tyler Sweary's looking at Friday, and it's going to be a good litmus test of where we're at as a team at this point in week 4.
In a game of two coaches who are also looking to find out exactly what they've got in their teams, Perrysburg hits the road, heads to Sylvania. They take on Southview. As we mentioned, the Jackets rolled Fremont Ross just a week ago. Southview, a little bit of a surprise losing on the road at Findlay, just given all the quarterback issues down there and the situation. But the question we will have is this Perrysburg team for real? Because this is probably their first real test. And also, will Southview be able to bounce back and challenge what we expect to be a solid Yellow Jacket squad?
Yeah, I look at this game from a year ago, and I remember a lot of people were very infatuated with Perrysburg last year. And what Perrysburg does is really, really well. They're a well-coached football team. They're fundamentally sound. They do things that a good football team should do. But that St. Francis score is still in the back of my head a little bit. 28-21 at the Glass Bowl. Not saying St. Francis isn't better. We're going to find out how good St. Francis is on Friday, because they go to Clyde, which is a tough lower division football team. St. Francis wins that game, and dare I say wins it handily. Okay, you can excuse being pushed a little bit by St. Francis. But this is probably the best test they've had as far as what we knew or thought about teams coming into the season. And I look at Perrysburg, and I think we're going to learn a lot about them. Southview, I think we're also going to learn a lot about who they are mentally as a football team. I was not surprised that Findlay won. I was surprised at how wide the margin was. And I know 2 touchdowns doesn't seem like a lot, but it never felt like Southview was ever close in that football game. When you were giving scores out, Findlay had a 2 touchdown margin pretty much the entire game. It wasn't like it was, things just got away or Findlay scored a garbage touchdown late kind of thing. That was kind of always firmly in Findlay's camp. I wonder, when I look at this Southview team mentally, what they are. And Justin Keller said it. Shawn Kiss said it. We've heard John Gallius say it. Can you win a game like this? And I guarantee you Steve Hardy is asking himself the same thing tonight. Can we win a game like this? This is one that I don't know that you would count as a winnable game before the season started, but nobody expected them to be in the game with Whitmer last year either, and they were. What team shows up? You're going to find a lot about what kind of senior leadership you have on this team on Friday as well. And even more important is you get Perrysburg at your place. And I can't tell you, even though it's a turf field now, I can't tell you how invaluable it is, especially at the high school level, to be at home for a big game like that. And I do wonder, will Southview come out and put up the kind of game that we saw them play against Whitmer? Or are we going to see a team that doesn't have a lot of confidence in themselves? Because the gauntlet doesn't get easier because they're at Whitmer next week. And if you lose this one and you go into next week and you lose that one, you're another year where, yeah, it's nice that we might win a Cardinal Division title, but what do we really prove? What are we when we get to the playoffs? And I know a lot of times people don't want to be talking about playoffs in week 4, but you need to know something about who you are before you get too late in the season. And Southview on paper, talent-wise, is right there, probably the best on paper in the Cardinal Division. Napoleon maybe a tick lower, Clay right there as well. But I just look at that Southview team, and I want to see my team come out and just look like a team that feels like they belong on the same field as Perrysburg on Friday.
Lima Senior will take their sparkling 3-0 record to the other end of Sylvania when they face off with Northview, a team really struggling on this one. I don't really see any other way that this game goes anyway besides the Wildcats having a tough go. Uphill sledding, if you will.
Lima Senior's really good this year. They beat Findlay at Findlay. They've got an athletic bunch, probably the best team we've seen in Allen County since probably 2015 when they had guys like Ruben Flowers and Rico Stafford, and they were really good. They had a lot of Division I talent on that team. I do question whether Northview can get a win this year. I think we're at that point. They will play Springfield. That might be their best shot. This is going to be a lot tougher, I think, than what people thought it was going to be coming into the season. And credit the job that the staff has done down at Lima Senior, because they have looked really good, and they won a Buckeye Division game, if you will, a couple weeks ago. And this Lima Senior team is going to look at this because the rest of the City League is not going to be able to compete with the Spartans. I don't even think I'm speaking out of school by saying if Lima Senior doesn't win the City League, I will be absolutely flabbergasted. I don't even think you could assume that anybody else will be in the conversation. So it's going to be a tough night for Northview. I think same thing that we just kind of talked about, maybe on a different level, like what Steve Hardy's looking for. I think Greg Soma's looking for his kid just to put up a good fight and to be in the game and play a solid game and do the best they can to give Lima Senior problems on Friday.
A rather intriguing matchup with two of those teams over in the the Cardinal Division, as Findlay heads up to Clay. Clay coming off a loss to Whitmer. Findlay coming off that win over Southview. I think this is another one of those games where you step back and go, if we weren't doing something else at the same time on Friday, this is a game I'd like to be viewing.
I would be in the front row wearing my most neutral shirt I could possibly do, because this is going to be one of the best high school football games in Northwest Ohio all year, I have a feeling. That stat line, or that score line that Clay had against Whitmer, 45-14, is misleading. People who saw that game, I'm not saying that it would have been a one-score game but essentially this Clay team with Mason Heinschel was a magician last Friday. Nobody left that stadium, regardless on what side you sat on, and thought, kid can't play quarterback. He is phenomenal. And yes, he's going to have to keep his team in the game, but I loved watching Troy Hazuda play last week. Hudson Byers, the tight end, is really good. Line play is going to dictate a lot of what happens for Clay. We saw that be the issue last week. Defensively, Clay had a hard time slowing Whitmer down. You hate to say it's going to be a shootout, but if Clay's going to win this game, that's what it's going to have to be. It's going to have to be matching points and doing their best to kind of put up a lot of offensive yardage. And Clay can do that. They've got a talented offense. Findlay, on the other hand, went to a different quarterback last week, a kid by the name of Landon Eckelberry, who Stephen Adams had said in the Findlay Courier this week, he's a kid that is just a football player. They toyed with him at quarterback, but they wanted him on the field if they could have him. So they moved him to wide receiver, moved him to linebacker, and then when Ryan goes down, you try Riley Corcos out. I know that Landon and Riley actually split time in that game against Lima Senior. Landon basically got the reins of the offense last week, and you saw what happened. You're going on the road, though. And the last two games were at Finley, and you're now leaving the friendly confines of Donnell Stadium, and you're going up to Ted Federici Field. And we talked about it with John Gallius last week. This is a stadium that has a great atmosphere on Friday nights now. That place will be packed to the gills. It's BCSN's game of the week for a reason, and it will be every bit as entertaining, I think, a game as we will see. Again, Clay's got to win or at least break even at the line of scrimmage. They cannot allow, especially on defense, they cannot allow Landon Eckelberry to have all day to throw. That was the problem last week, as Brady Ford had a lot of time to throw the football. Not saying that Whitmer doesn't have a phenomenal offensive line, because they do. Probably one of the best in Northwest Ohio, if not the state. That's what happens when you've got a 4/5-star tackle going to Ohio State, anchoring that line. But Clay still has to be able to put pressure on a freshman and make a freshman look like a freshman. Stephen Adams and his staff, I guarantee you, are going to try and find ways to mitigate those freshman mistakes. But as a defense, Clay has to go in with the mindset that we've got to get pressure and we've got to force some turnovers and some mistakes if we want to win this football game. They can put up the points. There's no question Clay's going to score points. It's, can the defense keep Finley off the scoreboard enough to win that game? But again, I have a soft spot for Clay in my heart. I also have a soft spot for Stephen Adams. He's such a fun guy to talk to. We'll talk to him later in the season, but this is one, like you said, if I could be anywhere not calling a game and it was, you don't have anything to do this Friday, where would you want to go? It'd be that game.
And last but certainly not least, in a game that you will hear live on Q1055 with a couple of voices that you've been listening to for the last hour or so. 6:30 pregame, 7 o'clock kickoff for Whitmer, hitting the road, heading out to Don Paul Stadium to take on Fremont Ross. And it's a real simple question, because I think it's going to be hard to not look at it the exact same way as we were looking at the Clay game last week, that you're going straight forward, business as usual. And if you're lucky, I know it's never good luck to mention it, but if you're lucky, you try to get the clock running in the second half.
For sure. You heard me say it last week. Weird stuff does happen at Don Paul Stadium, and people may laugh when they hear me say that. I have been there for some really weird football games, just stuff that didn't seem right or totally went against what everybody thought it was going to be. I don't think that's going to be the case on Friday, because Whitmer is just super talented, but it's about how you address this game. And I use the phrase business as usual or a business trip, because this is one of those games, if you let Fremont Ross hang around, you're giving them hope that they can play with you. And the faster you kind of snuff that out and stamp that out, the better off Whitmer's going to be. And that's what good teams do. That's where, when you're a team that's supposed to be in contention for your league and possibly make a deep run in the state tournament, you have to be able to be a team that when you play against competition that's better than you come out, you punch them in the mouth, for lack of a better phrase, and you get your work in and you get out. And you give those kids that are backups time to play on Friday. This game, to me, is more about Whitmer, even though Fremont Ross is 1-2 and they're playing at home. This, to me, is more about Whitmer and how they start, how they execute from the get-go, and how they basically come out of the gates, because good teams come out hot. They don't let up. And before you know it, like you said, it's the third quarter and there's a running clock already. This is a game where Whitmer should be able to do that. I don't want to take anything away from Fremont Ross. They have some talented players. Carson Caden, their quarterback, is very good. They've got a host of backs that are good. They've got a young man by the name of Caden Miley, who's a starting tackle, who's a big boy, who's got a lot of MAC offers. But this is still a Fremont Ross team that lost 35-0 to Perrysburg last week. Still a Fremont Ross team that did not play well week 1. These are game against Tiffin Columbia. This is a game where Whitmer needs to go in, and they need to be able to, from the word go, be up big and put Fremont Ross away early so they can start looking to that game. Because Southview is going to come in next week, and that might be one Whitmer won't take as lightly. So in a way, this might be a little bit of a trap game, but if the Panthers come out and do what they're supposed to do, then you feel really good if you're Ken Winters, because it means that your team doesn't need that extra kick in the butt to get locked in.
A couple of other games that we'll be watching over the course of Friday as well throughout the area. Some interesting matchups coming through Oak Harbor. Undefeated Oak Harbor taking on undefeated Maumee. Your Port Clinton and Ottawa Hills going at it. St. Francis and Clyde. Big one, as well as Liberty Center host Archbold. That's a ranked matchup in almost every projection we can see. Otsego taking on Rossford as well. Eastwood and Lakes, a bit of old rivalries there. And there was one more that I had just put my finger on. Here we go. Hopewell Loudon hosting Gibsonburg. Also a big matchup out east.
I know we're an NLL show, but I'm going to give a little love to a former NLL school real quick. Evan Karchner has done an unbelievable job at Maumee, but even more so, that game against Oak Harbor might be the biggest game that Maumee has played in probably 15, 20 years. Maybe I'm going a little bit further back than I should. It's at least the biggest game that program has played in the last decade, and Maumee gets the Rockets at home. Oak Harbor is really good, have been for the last couple of years. So that would be another one where I'd love to see that game, because I'm absolutely intrigued by what Maumee can do. Because again, it's like we talked about. It's one thing to win those games against teams you're supposed to beat or that you're better than on paper. This is, can you learn to win that big game? Because big games don't go your way all the time, and you've got to be able to weather the storm. And it's going to be a good learning experience on Friday for the Maumee Panthers. And I hope for their sake that they come away with a victory. But man, what a turnaround job. This is the first time I think they've been 3-0. I think it was since the early 2000s. So just really excited to see what they do. And that would be another one I'd love to be at this Friday. So, well, I know we went long tonight, but this was the beauty of this. Like you said, when we have good conversation, we want to keep those going. Thanks to our guest, Shawn Kiss, the head coach at Bowling Green, and also our good friend, Justin Keller, former Whitmer coach, former Whitmer quarterback. He is just one of those guys that just is so fun to talk to, knows the game so well. So we appreciate it. As Dan put up there, available on Spotify, iHeart, Pandora, Stitcher, Amazon Music, Spreaker, and Podcast Addict, working on adding it to Apple. For some reason, the folks out in Cupertino just will not take our podcast, but we'll keep working on it. So again, that'll be posted live tomorrow morning. All shows are archived on YouTube, our YouTube page, NLL Weekly. You can search that too at all those podcast platforms as well. Dan, thanks for your time. Thanks to those of you who either checked this out after the fact, watched it live. Appreciate your time. Any final thoughts before we get out of here, my friend?
No, just looking forward to not only I can't wait to see the mystique of Don Paul Stadium, having never been out there.
It is one of those fields that I tell you, for a smaller community, you really could not have put a better stadium in place. It's a unique place, and it's a fun place to call a game. And good people out there too. It's just a fun venue. So I'm looking forward for you seeing it as well, because they've done a lot of work to it, and it's a great field. So with that, we'll get out of here. Again, thanks to Shawn Kiss, Justin Keller, and thanks to you for listening. Next week, we will tape like we usually do, 7:00 next Wednesday. Make sure you check out Twitter at cschmid01. I'll put all the information up there as well, so you can check us out there. Again, leave us a like, subscribe on YouTube. All those things help us out. So again, for Dan Naraki, Chris Schmidbauer, thank you so much for listening to NLL Weekly. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye, everybody.